This week on TGIF, we investigate time travel. This episode of TGIF is brought to you by the experts at supergeek.com.au. Need something super fixed, super fast? Call Supergeek on 13Geek. Time travel has been a staple of science fiction since the late 19th century, and if you haven't seen Back to the Future right now, then you should really stop telling people that, because really, you're just embarrassing yourself. Anyway, we all know about time machines in TV and movies, but the real question is it possible? Like, for reals? As it turns out, it actually is. And I'm not just talking about the whole sneaky 1 second per second thing. If you've ever ridden in a plane or a train or been in a car or even gone for a run, you've experienced the effects of something called time dilation. Okay, so perhaps experienced is the wrong word to use here. The effects at this sort of scale are so minuscule that it's not even worth thinking about. But it's technically a form of time travel. It works like this. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, neither time nor space are fixed. The only thing constant in our entire universe is the speed of light. Now, this next bit's a little tricky, but stick with it and it'll hopefully make a little bit of sense. Say there's a guy in a spaceship, and as he's flying along, he decides to do a science experiment. So he takes a flashlight and shines it straight down into a mirror. The light from the torch goes straight down into the mirror and bounces back up towards the torch in a straight line. Let's see it again in slow motion. Straight up and down. Now, let's look at this scenario from a different frame of reference. Let's look at it from outside the spaceship. Like before, the light bounces down to the mirror and back, but from this frame of reference, the light travels a longer distance, in a V shape, instead of straight up and down. Now, speed is a calculation of distance over time, and since the speed of light is constant and the distance the light has travelled is longer, this means that time itself must also be longer for the equation to remain true. Therefore, from outside the spaceship, we see the spaceman is experiencing time slower than we do, because he's moving relative to us. This means that for every unit of time our spaceman experiences, from our frame of reference, we experience slightly more, which means that he is technically travelling forward through time. Go fast enough and the difference becomes noticeable. The cool thing about this is that it isn't just some sort of crazy thought experiment. It's actually been proven to exist. In 1971, physicist Joseph Hafal and astronomer Richard Keating took two perfectly synchronized atomic clocks. They put one of them on a plane ride around the world and left the other one on the ground. When they were reunited, the time was found to be off by a couple of 100 milliseconds. The clock on the plane had travelled forward through time. This sort of relativistic time travel may seem pretty useless, but when you start getting fast enough, things get interesting. If you were travelling in our spaceship at 99.999% the speed of light, for every 1 year you experienced on the spaceship, 223 years would pass back at home. It sounds like time travel to me. This episode of TGIF is brought to you by the experts at supergeek.com.au. Supergeek specialise in providing support to home computer users and small businesses without their own in-house IT staff. Their services include data recovery, virus removal, hardware repairs, backup solutions and basic computer training. To learn what Supergeek can do for you, visit supergeek.com.au. So we've proven that with a fast enough spaceship you can travel forwards through time. But can you ever go backwards? Stephen Hawking doesn't think so. Here's the thing. Moving forward through time, like we've described, presents absolutely no problem to the laws of physics or causality as we know them. All you're doing is taking a step back and letting time pass by. Going into the past, however, presents a whole host of paradoxes. Here's one of them. It's called the grandfather paradox, and like our spaceman explanation, it's got a nice little animation to go along with it. Say you travel backwards in time and go and kill your grandfather. This means that he won't be able to meet your grandmother and you eventually won't be born. Which means that you won't be able to go back in time and kill your grandfather. Which means that he'll go on living his happy life and eventually meet your grandmother, and down the line you'll be born. Which means you'll be able to take a time machine and go back and kill your grandfather. Which means that you won't be born, which means that you will. Which means that you won't, which means that you will, and you won't, and you will. Yeah, congratulations, you've just sort of destroyed the universe. The thing is, travelling through time backwards may sort of kinda actually be a bit possible. See, there's these things called wormholes that basically act as tunnels through moments in space and time. Now they're purely theoretical, but there's nothing in our current understanding of physics that actually stops them from possibly existing. And this means that unless there's some sort of universal law that prevents this sort of backwards time travel, which is the far more likely option, it does mean that you might be able to go back in time, which is, yeah. The thing is, there's a lot of unanswered questions about time travel, and we can't exactly rely on somebody from the future coming back to help us out, because in order for that to happen, we'd need to have already built a functioning wormhole time machine, because you can't cross over a bridge that hasn't been built yet. And that's it for this week's episode of TGIF. I hope you enjoyed it, and that if we do ever discover time travel, you'll make sure to send me a hoverboard right now. What's a shame? Anyway, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and if you've got anything that you would like to suggest for the show, send us an email at tgif@mulliganmedia.net. I've been Dominic Mulligan, and I'll see you next time.